Welcome to the Social Workers Everywhere podcast, where we uncover the powerful, diverse, and far reaching impact of social work across the globe.
Each episode, we spotlight the practice, research, and experience of students and social workers from a wide range of industries and professions. From clinical care to policy change, from leadership to grassroots advocacy and community engagement, social work is truly everywhere.
Through the voices of the University of Maryland School of Social Work community, including faculty, staff, students, alumni, and global partners, we'll explore unique perspectives and innovative initiatives shaping the future of the field. We are your hosts, Dr. Lynn Michalopoulos.
David Robertson.
Today, we are very excited to have an interview conversation with Patrice Forrester and Leigh Beck. So welcome to you both. Patrice, do you want to get started and just do a brief introduction?
Hello, everyone. My name is Patrice Forrester, and I'm a graduate of the PhD program at University of Maryland in Baltimore. And I'm also a volunteer with U.S. El Salvador Sister Cities, which we'll be talking about more today.
Thank you. And Leigh?
I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm originally from Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I got involved with the U.S. El Salvador Sister City Project. Recently moved to the Baltimore area and have a connection to the University of Maryland. I did get the opportunity to train student athletes and athletic staff on mental health, which was really a cool way to get to know the school. And moving closer to Patrice now, we get to collaborate more. And so really excited about this connection with the great school at University of Maryland. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Can you give us a brief overview on the history of the U.S. El Salvador Sister Cities?
This organization started during the Civil War in the 80s in El Salvador. And it came about because during the war, there were Salvadorans who had been displaced from their communities because of the war that was funded $1 million a day by U.S. tax dollars. And these displaced Salvadorans were a lot in refugee camps in surrounding countries, were trying to repopulate communities in their home country. And there was organization Cryptis who was helping organize these communities to make that happen. And part of their strategy was to reach out to the international community because they know if there was international support, particularly from countries like the US, there would be more protection for these people, Salvadorans trying to repopulate. So different towns and cities across the US responded to this call out to help financially support, but also particularly to help on the ground. So starting during the war, delegates from sistering communities in the US went to these new repopulating communities saying that we are here to witness and help protect these people who are trying to repopulate. And we'll report back to our government if we see any sort of human rights violations, things like that. So that's the origin. And many of those relationships continue today. Other sistering relationships between other cities and towns have started later than that in the 90s, things like that.
That's great. So your connection originally, because you said you were aware of and got connected to Sister City it wasn't through the Baltimore.
It was not. No, so it was through one of the original sistering communities of Cambridge, Massachusetts. When I was 1 year old, my father went as a photojournalist as part of one of their first delegations. And so I actually grew up with the images and stories of this relationship, this community. It became sort of an official sistering relationship. The Cambridge City Council passed a resolution recognizing the relationship. And our high school, Cambridge Ringe and Latin, would send delegates of high schoolers down. And so I was able to go on my first delegation when I was about 15 years old as part of a high school delegation of fellow high school students. And then I've been able to go back since then as well. So I've been a lifelong member.
That's really cool.
It's powerful. The mission of U.S. El Salvador Sister Cities focuses on mutual community accompaniment, organizing, education, and advocacy. Can you both give a few examples of what that looked like in practice? And then the second question to that is, what are some of the activities that you all engage in?
In terms of the mutual accompaniment, just to give some background, I joined U.S. El Salvador Sister Cities during the pandemic, actually. So online initially, and joined a lot of committees. So as a part of those committees, and I've been in a few of them at this point, I did some activities around the mutual accompaniment. So, for instance, as Leigh was talking about how different towns and cities sistered, partnered with different Salvadoran towns during the Civil War, and even to this day, I went with one of those towns, Bangor, Maine, on their delegation to Carrasque, which is in sort of the northwest part of El Salvador near Honduras. And through that trip, I was able to see how over all of these 30 years since the time of the Civil War, this town in Maine had kept up this relationship with this community to the point where, everybody knew them. They welcomed us, even us who were just getting to know them with fireworks or something
Mm,
that was making,
Wow.
celebratory noises when we got there. So I saw that kind of love between them. And then within that accompaniment, some of these towns and cities in the US, they might support student scholarships. So a lot of the students trying to get to university, as well as supporting local businesses. They do some of that promoting of economic empowerment, and through our delegation fees, as well as other donations, being able to support just different endeavors that our partner organization, CRIPTES, does in communities over there, does in partnership with different community leaders to promote community development, help with youth development, and other things that they may want to do to improve their lives and their society, as well as social justice initiatives. That's one example of that, some of the different things that US El Salvador Sister Cities does as a part of its work.
That's great. I mean, if you listeners out there, if you listen to episode one, we were focusing on, we were talking about the importance of community engagement. I feel like this is a true example of that. So that's really cool. Leigh, did you have anything you wanted to add as well in terms of any of the activities or examples that you'll engage in?
We sort of use our financial privilege to try to do what we can to offset how our US tax dollars continue to fund things that don't align with our values. And so we do a lot of fundraising, whether that's educational scholarships to projects like building latrines, things like that. But then there's also funding the organizing. A lot of those projects would not be possible without the infrastructure that Cryptis provides to kind of plan all of that out, things like that. But then there's also advocacy we've around policy, advocacy around wrongful detentions, things like that. So there's also, since the war, been a lot of dialogue between sister cities members going to US elected officials. Actually, early on, there were US elected officials that went on delegations with sister cities to understand how our tax-paying dollars are impacting the lives of our Salvadoran brothers and sisters, and kind of helping educate and think about kind of what is the type of policy that we as US citizens want to be impacting El Salvador, how we want that to be impacting El Salvador. Mining, so a lot El Salvador is very impacted by climate change, and what's been really beautiful in a way, although we wish we didn't have to do this, but communities like Bangor, Maine, we have a sistering relationship between a farmer organization in Maine, and their kind of realities of facing climate justice are very similar to a lot of the Salvadoran community. So there's also that common understanding of a lot of these policies and political advocacy that we're doing is a mutual interest as well, particularly when we think about issues like climate justice, but other issues right now, like militarization. That's always been a concern that's morphed over time, but we really see how these advocacy efforts are advocating for kind of both sides of this relationship, because we have just in a lot of ways a common reality that we're trying to work against.
And to add to that, going along with that mutuality as well, or mutual issues that both the US and El Salvador can work on, we also have a popular education school that actually it's going to be this August, but that's also opportunity for people from the States to go to El Salvador and learn about popular education from different Salvadoran organizers, and talk about issues that they may have in common, or in different contexts, there may be some different issues, but how can we learn from what you're doing in El Salvador, have done over the years, and think about how we may have to adapt or maybe it can apply with certain issues in the US as well that we may have in common. So I think that's something else that we do. And then also having urgent alerts along with the policy advocacy, just inviting other people within our network or even outside of it to join on to different letters or different policy actions as well to promote social justice, whether in the US or Latin America, El Salvador.
That's great.
I'm just curious to how can like current students be involved with any of this, with the letter writing, with the advocacy, even just with the educational of just even sharing content online.
So our website, salvadorsolidarity.org is a great resource. And that has our events page where it shows things like our member meetings, where those are open to the public and kind of have different topics that we do regularly. But also, if you're trying to get more involved, our different committees are there. You can sign up, though, if you want to just sign up for the Urgent Action Network. You can do that through our website and just be getting those alerts. But our website has a lot of past blogs as well. And our staff are publishing updates about particularly right now, we're getting a lot of them about just kind of the changing political landscape right now. So all of that. And then, of course, you can reach out to Patrice or I, and we're happy to chat more about different ways that you can be involved, even if it's just resharing, like you said, content.
That's great.
Yeah. And I know some of my peers and we don't really sometimes know how to engage or what aspects to engage. And so, just
I would
even,
I would add going on a delegation, one of the best ways.
Yes. And
mm,
the popular
Equal
education.
opportunity.
Yeah. Yes.
can you give a little bit of background about the delegations and how often they are? Is it quarterly, yearly, annually?
So we have them annually. We almost always have multiple ones that are going on. As Patrice mentioned, the one that she went on was a delegation of a sistering community in the US going to their sistering community in El Salvador. So we have those ones. And oftentimes we often have space for other people like Patrice, who isn't from Bangor, Maine, but was still able to participate because those are oftentimes we have space for to bring additional people. But then we also have like theme-based ones, like the popular education one that Patrice mentioned, which that right now is, a lot of different community organizers from different parts of the US that are participating. So that is often one where we're getting people who aren't necessarily connected to a specific sister city. But we advertise those again on our website. And then again, also feel free to reach out to us, and we can also, like, on the calendar, it shows you which ones are coming up. If you join like our listserv, you'll get call outs when we have one coming up and when you can apply for that. We try to have scholarship money. Each delegation's a little different with that, but we always make an effort to not make cost a prohibiting factor for anyone. Sometimes we're more successful than others, but we really always, I would say I'm pretty proud we've been pretty successful.
Really, and covering the cost for everyone or having it based on would people apply?
So people apply. So in general, we always include scholarship funding as part of our just regular fundraising. Sometimes specific committees have more capacity to share the cost than others. So it is a little bit kind of delegation by delegation, a little bit different what the situation is. But we kind of share that information. People have a time to kind of apply for the scholarship, how much they need, things like that. So.
That's super exciting. What you talked a lot about the successes of this work. What are some of the challenges? I'm sure
so I
within
guess I'll
everything that's
start.
happening, I'm sure there are quite a few challenges.
So I'm more of a recent addition to US El Salvador Sister Cities Network. So I'm kind of talking more what I'm seeing as a more newer member. So I think some of the challenges sometimes are in terms of connecting to more current issues. So for instance, this organization was started during the time of the Civil War, and that was a particular context. And I think that US El Salvador Sister Cities has a lot of strengths with, I think, partnering with Crib Days, who does a lot of work within Salvadoran communities. But now a lot of Salvadorians over the years, they're in the States now, a lot of them, a large community of them. So it's connecting also to maybe some of the issues that may be impacting Salvadorians in the United States, which may be different or they may have different concerns. This is just my personal perspective. This is not true. I know a lot of times immigrants, when they're coming to the States, they're very focused on getting their work, just working hard, just getting through. And so sometimes they may not have enough time to be as involved in some of the things that we may be doing. So I think it's just kind of connecting more, navigating that community over here. And then I would say just trying to gain maybe, which we've already started talking about, kind of a more diverse membership in terms of age, ethnicity, and maybe even in terms of regionally too. So yeah, those are some of the challenges I've observed.
I mean, I'm not to be boring. I would start with we have the same challenges that most small nonprofits who are doing political work. We have much more work than we have people who are willing to kind of volunteer. We, are constantly trying to fundraise. We are constantly navigating kind of the charity versus solidarity mindset, both within and outside of our organization. They're definitely the generational piece we're feeling, where a lot of our people who were there from the beginning are aging or actually passing, and there really isn't that generation behind them. We've been kind of getting people like Patrice and, other people who have come, and there's a lot to be optimistic about, but we have had committees that are no longer because there was no one to kind of carry that torch after kind of, and that happens. We had committees where it was really kind of like that one person holding it down for decades. And it was just challenging to kind of pass it on. Some of it is for a while. So when it first started, El Salvador was in the front page news. That's how my dad could make money, was because as a photojournalist, he could sell his photos because national newspapers wanted pictures of El Salvador. Then that kind of changed a bit. It's back now. But I think to Patrice's point, we've really kind of had to be learning as we're doing it, like, how do we organize in this new political context? The Salvadoran social movement is really feeling it right now, as far as kind of this new political context. So I think it's a lot of just the thing that most nonprofits experience, but also some of, those particular nuances and changes in demographics and dynamics and political context and all of that. But I would say the biggest thing is kind of this question of the next generation. And particularly because we have also, I mean, I will say, right, like, I don't have the wealth that the generation before me had. That was, in a lot of ways, what has carried this organization, is we did have, to put it bluntly, we had a lot of wealthy people who were very generous and willing to kind of say, I'm going to put lots of money towards this effort. Unfortunately, a lot of the people that we are recruiting are wonderful, great people, but like me, don't have, unfortunately, those deep pockets. And you can have all the energy and motivation, but unfortunately, yeah, again, I'm very optimistic, but and then again, I don't think that's unique to us.
Can you
Yeah.
describe, I'm thinking about just for the listeners and students that may be listening, what the term charity versus solidarity means?
So that's kind of something we often say in sister cities. We're always working on our ability to meet it ourselves. So there's this real intention that in a charity relationship, there's really this sort of dominant power differential that's reinforced in terms of, in charity, you control the money, where you donate it to, what it's going to be used for. And there's really this mindset of, I know best how to use what I'm sharing. In solidarity, it's really this understanding that we want to acknowledge systems of power and privilege,
Right.
but the point of our relationship is actually to undermine those, not reinforce them. And kind of baseline is that acknowledgement of, this isn't that I more knowledgeable or better than you, right? A lot of organizations come into places like El Salvador and sort of say, we have this money, this is how you're going to spend it. We're the experts in how to do it. Ours is much more of a conversation and a difference, actually. We really take the lead from Cryptus as far as, what should money and resources be used for, because we see them as the experts in determining that, not us. And also really this acknowledgement that if, if someone else isn't free, none of us are free. And that our kind of human rights, our destinies, our fates are all intertwined and dependent on each other, and seeing kind of that mutual also sort of learning and knowledge where we have things we can learn from you and you have things that we can learn from them. And it's more that exchange. And it's a hard thing to do because you do need to acknowledge the power dynamics, the differentials, while simultaneously saying, okay, how do we use that power and privilege that we have to undermine the fact that we have all this, right? Have my power and privilege, not because I'm better, but because I was born as a white person in the US. And if Salvadoran human rights are being violated, acknowledging my tax dollars are doing that, and what do I want to do about that? Am I okay with that? And also acknowledging, right, like I should be invested in that, because especially in our world today, those things are so dynamic, and our borders, right, they don't mean anything when we're talking about these things, that what's going on in El Salvador impacts my fate, my human rights, all of that, and vice versa.
I was just gonna say that I think the solidarity, as explained by Leigh, I think that goes along with what I was saying. Like, even despite some of the challenges I listed, and we both listed, that I think as an organization, what I like about it is that we're willing to talk about these things, at least to some extent. Um, and we're actually working on different things, different plans to kind of try to address that. So, and I think that comes from that solidarity perspective.
That's important.
Could you both talk to us briefly about the concept of liberation theology? And there was some kind of like intertwining of it prior, but I'm super curious specifically and how it's related to global social work.
So, liberation theology is a movement that began largely in the 1960s or 70s in the Catholic Church in Latin America. And this movement really had this belief that it was important to transform unjust social structures through, first of all, seeing injustice. And seeing injustice can include hearing about the injustice from those who are most impacted, and then using one's religious faith, your knowledge and understanding of God, to inform what you're seeing, how you're seeing that injustice, in order to develop some alternatives to that. And then finally, engaging in some action. And that action is coming out of all of the knowledge that was learned from seeing that injustice, applying your religious faith to it, in order to implement changes and solutions to transform that reality. And so for me, how that's important to global social work is that global social work, I looked online at the International Federation of Social Workers, and it talked a lot about not only promoting the well-being of individuals and communities, but also looking at some of those structures that underpin those injustices and trying to undermine that or create alternative realities, in other words, instead of that injustice. So I think this is a way of kind of looking at reflecting, and then also using those reflections to create other structures, going really deep into undermining injustices in the world.
The work that both of you do with Sister Cities, how has it informed your social work practice?
Sure. So I think that I really appreciated from so many early experiences of that interconnectedness, and that like my sense of the world and how connected I am to the world. Really, one, social work was a profession that I was like, I get to dive deeper into that. And so really just kind of saw social work as that kind of door to go further into that kind of experience and awareness. And I think also this charity versus solidarity model. And I think particularly social work is still struggling as a profession, really struggles with kind of, are we charity or solidarity?
Yeah.
Again, I think having this really practical example with all its flaws and ways that we fall short of what that really looks like and what's possible has made me confident, again, since early on in my social work career, of embracing solidarity. And I know which side kind of I want to be on in that debate. So just really appreciate that I've gotten that real, again, real life experience. Like, actually got to go there, actually got to sit with people and have that experience. And they're just, it changed everything. It's one of the most impactful experiences I've had in terms of how I approach my life, but particularly my social work wherever I go.
Do you think it informed you wanting to be a social worker?
So my mother's a social worker, so that
In
I
multiple.
what interesting, I started out wanting to be in social work because of community organizing, and so absolutely, I also, to be a lot because of my mother, but also because of this experience, really had that perspective of what social work can be, and that it's, a lot of people have a very limited understanding of what social work, and I, again, yeah, since the beginning kind of had that point of view of the potential. I actually went in for community organizing. It was very macro social worker. My field place really made me fall in love with social work. So I deeply believe that is what social work is, the micro and macro. I think particularly that's part of my experience of, like, from the beginning, I was doing and thinking about things in a meso micro perspective, particularly because of my experience with sister cities. Absolutely.
That's really cool. It's awesome.
So for me, I've always been interested in the macro social work, and I was inspired a lot by civil rights movement, learning about that history.
Mhm.
And so I always kind of saw myself, I want to be involved in community for work. I think I started out doing a lot of clinical social work, doing therapy. So I think US El Salvador Sister Cities really allowed me to have space to do more of that macro work and
Yeah.
also on a global scale because I'm very interested in different cultures and also do other things with other entities and peoples in different countries outside of just El Salvador. I think it just allowed me to expand, not just see myself as limited to the States, but as Leigh was saying, going beyond that. And it's also helped me, I think, to grow more in terms of advocacy because I've been able to be on the policy committee that we have for a time and helped with some of the urgent alerts, creating some of those and learning that, oh, yeah, you can sign on to a letter or, go off with other organizations doing different social justice actions.
Right.
And so have even started doing that even in my personal life, reaching out to a Congress person, in that represents my area for different issues happening that are unjust, I feel. And yeah, being able to kind of advocate for justice. And so it's allowed me knowledge around how to do that and become more comfortable with it, as well as having a space to learn about leadership and how to, do different things around community organizing. I'm a very shy, quiet person naturally, and so tend to kind of stay back. And so, but I've had a lot of opportunities and space in sister cities to actually lead at some points or present something. I think it's just helped me to grow in some of those areas a lot more.
That's great.
I have a question just for Patrice, just because you talked about how this opportunity began during the pandemic. And I'm curious to how technology has been an asset or liability in kind of helping you connect with this opportunity. And how has it kind of been, how's it been a bridge to getting the message out on a more global, utilizing technology, since that was the kind of our bread and butter during the pandemic was technology, which was, we were overwhelmed by it, but just curious.
I think it helped me. I mean, I did not really know about this network at all before, but how I learned about it actually was from the University of Maryland, Baltimore, because I was in the PhD program at the time and I went to a Spanish language. This was before the pandemic happened, conversation club that they were having or some type of group around learning Spanish. And I'd been wanting to learn, and they had a flyer for sister cities of going on that popular education tour. And I couldn't go for some reason that year. And then the pandemic happened shortly thereafter. But I reached out to someone in the network and they said, "Oh, why don't you just join us online for our national gathering?" And I think, yeah, technology allowed me to be able to at least connect still, even though I wasn't able to go physically in person on that tour at that time. And then thereafter, I joined these committees that we met online. So I think it helped us in connecting still, in spite of not being in the same areas, because I'm not in an area where there's like a sistering community in El Salvador. So I was still able to connect through technology with everyone in the network. And then as things opened up, I have been able to meet people in person, like when I went on that tour. So I think having both has helped. But yeah, that's how technology, I said, was helpful during that
That's
time.
helpful. Like, you just made me think because, even though we're social workers, I think people think that we're all wanting to be like in front of 100 people, and that's not the case. There's still people who are a little bit introverted, who still
Yeah.
want to connect, and it's like we can still do it. Online opportunities exist. So
Mm.
thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable, sharing that aspect, because a lot of people are just like they're isolated who want to engage, but like what in what realm that can make them feel comfortable but also engaged.
Yeah.
Appreciate you for that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about in our initial conversations about sister cities. You both discussed the legacy of Oscar Romero. Can you briefly talk about who he was and how he's influenced global social work practice?
Yeah, Oscar Romero, he's actually a saint in the Catholic Church now. At the time of the Civil War, he was an archbishop in the Catholic Church of El Salvador, and he spoke out against injustices that were going on during that time. A lot of government repression and really injustices against people who, had limited financial resources, especially. And so he actually was assassinated due to his advocating for people that were being impacted by all this injustice. And this happened actually when he was actually conducting a mass. So he was actually performing his religious duties and he was shot on March 24th, 1980. And
Mm.
to talk about how I believe that I think is very important for global social work, I want to share a quote from Romero that was shared to me by a Salvadorian staff member of Sister Cities. Her name is Zulma Tobar. And the quote says, this is from Romero: "I will not tire of declaring that if we really want an effective end to violence, we must remove the violence that lies at the root of all violence: structural violence, social injustice, exclusion of citizens from the management of the country, repression. All this is what constitutes the primal cause from which the rest flows naturally." And Zoma goes on to say that this is meaningful for her because the people of El Salvador have suffered these types of violences for many years. There have been struggles from the people to end violence, and there have been some victories. However, now more than ever, we need to be united in order to defeat structural violence in our countries and the world. And so Zuma said to me that she liked this quote from the Prophet Romero because it applied in the past as in current times. He was assassinated because he denounced this violence and the atrocities committed by the ruling class. Today, we need to replicate his voice to be in solidarity with those that are suffering the most under the oppressors of the people. So, in alignment with her, and also just personally, I think that what he did in terms of advocating against social injustices of the time, even to the point of being murdered for it, we kind of need that even today as social workers or people working in social work, to look at the root causes of injustice, not just what we're seeing on the outside, but what is propping up that injustice, and like go to that. And so I think for me, as I've learned more about his life and what he did, it really also speaks to me as I'm also Christian as well. And so I feel that thinking of someone that using my faith as well to apply to the realities of injustices that I'm seeing today. And as a social worker, how can I look at that, apply my faith to it, but also look at what are some alternative realities and engage in actions, whether it's advocacy or something else, in order to change that injustice and make things right for all people.
It's great. It's really nice.
Drop the mic.
His quotes, they're the million drop the mic, Romero. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So I do not identify as Christian, so I'll kind of speak to a little bit kind of as someone who does it, but is a huge Romero fan and has, has his picture everywhere. So first, just from a kind of cultural competency, cultural humility point of view, a lot of us social workers are going to be working more with people from Latin America, people, depending what city you work in, there are cities you're going to be working where you work with lots of Salvadorans. I'll just give a little, so knowing who this person is, because he isn't just important to the social, just kind of the lefties, he really is a national figure that's embraced.
Really.
And Patrice and I met with some leaders from a local church, and they shared around Romero's anniversary, because we were kind of just seeing what the communities were doing, if there's anything we could support. And they told us how many, and I'm not very good with religious practices, but part of your communion, I think you pick a saint. And he was sharing a lot of young people in their parish are picking Romero as their saint. So that stuck out to me. Just, as a social worker, we need to get to learn and understand, the cultures and communities of the communities that we're serving. And so just on that kind of level. But the other piece that I really, especially kind of the global social work, Romero represents an evolution. He did not start out in his role as archbishop so vocal about these issues, and actually evolved, particularly because of his close friend of his, Rutilio Grande, who was the first to be assassinated. And after his death, it was really when Romero really had a kind of huge movement of, I need to speak out about these things. And so there's many aspects to his story that are wonderful, but I think one of the things I always kind of look to is his evolution, and that story of we are always evolving, and how do we always kind of continue to bend towards justice, thinking about Martin Luther King. So it's quote, about that. So just, I also take that and just embracing, I will forever be a lifelong learner, and there's forever evolution. So that's one part of his story that I always kind of hold close to me.
That's really awesome. That's really great. Yeah. Sorry. I was just going to say, I think it's a great thing to add, because social workers and humans, we never arrive. Like, we're always still moving and growing.
And if you think you've arrived,
Right. That's when they're
a harmful mistake. How many social workers do we know who are like, I've arrived, and they can often cause harm, actually.
Yeah. Go ahead, Patrice. Sorry.
I was going to add, because I was thinking of also linking it to even to our context in the United States as well, like his life. As I was learning even more, about liberation theology in his life, I was thinking that liberation theology, some of those components were present in the civil rights movement with Martin King and other people in the South in particular. They were using their faith to apply to injustices around them, and then organizing marches or voter registration or even a political party. And I'm sure in South Africa. So I think some of the things that Romero did, if we look in all of our histories around the world, we'll probably find some components of it and see ways that it can be contextualized for all of our different places where we may reside or do social work.
So we are getting to the end of our episode here. We have one final question for both of you. Can you tell us one thing that every prospective social work student should know about global social work?
I don't think I have anything original to say. I think I would go back to really embracing solidarity versus charity, because particularly in the global social work, I think it's a little bit more behind. We're still charity over here in U.S. communities, but I do think there's a lot of people who I've even seen, like, there's solidarity here, and then when they start talking about like going to other countries, then
it becomes charity. That's very true.
So I would say really understanding what that is, and I would say that's what you're striving for. And then just what I just said about the evolution, and just kind of embracing that you are a forever learner, and as you eloquently said, you've never arrived. And so I would just emphasize.
Thank you. And Patrice?
Yeah, to add to that, I agree with what Leigh was saying. Being open, I think, to hearing different perspectives. So I think being open to different cultural perspectives even, and I would say along with that, being open to being uncomfortable. So a lot of times when you may enter into different spaces, different cultural spaces, it may be jarring because, maybe you're the only one that either, maybe thinks like you or looks like you, or this just feels different. But yeah, but being open to being okay with that and kind of learning, and along with the solidarity, you might find out you'll find a friend, or you'll find a partner in terms of things you may want to work on. So I think it can expand our minds and our views, as well as even being ourselves, our unique selves, but being open to different perspectives and being okay with the discomfort that may come from that, and rolling with it kind of. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. So we are at the end of our session. Thank you both so much for your time and your wonderful stories and insight. It's been really great. And I think it'll be very helpful for prospective students, current students, folks that aren't social workers. I'm definitely going to share with all of my friends and want to thinking about like, maybe I could do a delegation. I think this is a great opportunity. So thank you everyone for listening to the Social Workers Everywhere podcast. If you've been inspired by the stories and impacts shared today, consider supporting the University of Maryland School of Social Work. Your donation helps fund scholarships, research, innovative teaching, and community partnerships like the one here that makes a real difference.
Every gift matters. Visit us at sfw.umaryland.edu/gift to donate today. Choose other and specify global, please.
If you're interested in applying or learning more about attending the University of Maryland School of Social Work, please visit ssw.umaryland.edu/MSW. Thank you. Bye for now.